Let us return to Genesis chapter 4, where I want to spend some time with you, brethren, on the subject of considerations from Cain's life. Considerations from Cain's life. Cain's life is given to us for our learning. We know that because Romans chapter 15 and verse 4 specifically tells us this. The things that were written before time, that is, the previous things that were written, are for our learning. Not for our rejecting, not for our neglecting, but for our learning. And when it comes to Cain's life, we meet an amazing array of things we should learn from his life. Let me take a selection from them, and there's a long list of things that we learn from his life. I'll give you just a few of them just before we deal with one or two today. In his life, we meet his historical location in biblical history. His historical location, and that isn't unimportant, as we shall see. We meet his family setting. Again, not unimportant, and I'm going to say to you, super relevant for today. His family setting, super relevant to today. His religious upbringing. Now, spare and well when we come to that. Some of you, most of you, many of you may feel challenged and perhaps somewhat guilty. We'll see. When God speaks to us from his word, we shouldn't push back on it and complain, oh, the minister must be getting at me. Not at all. It is God helping us to be better. So when we come to his family settings, there are things that no question we will feel about our family setting out of step with God, and no good will ever come from that, ever. Thirdly, his religious upbringing has so many things to say to us. Fourthly, his parents' expectations and their heartbreaking disappointments in his life. Fifthly, his personal faith, and he was a believer. Now that might surprise you. But what kind of believing did he have? His character flaws, they are numerous, and boy, do they have lessons for us. You can learn a lot, you know, by looking at someone getting it wrong and say this to yourself, I shouldn't be like him. Bad idea. We also meet his ultimate ruination. And there's a long list of other things. Probably we won't get to them all, but I'll have a selection for you, and hopefully you'll get some benefit from them. So let's begin today with number 1. His historical location in space, in time, and in biblical history. Cain, the first son, if we exclude Adam, who is called a son of God's creating. But Cain is the first son born by natural generation. In other words, he came to exist in God's natural order of things. He had a mother, he had a father, and he was born into a family setting, obviously. But I don't want to plunge into the family, first of all. I want to plunge into something that is implied and lessons from where he is in history and what isn't told us about him, or what we haven't been told about his historical setting. It is of the greatest importance, as I hope you will realize. The question is, where has God placed this man in history? After all, he's placed you somewhere, hasn't he? You're here in this century. God has placed you in the here and now. He didn't place you back then. You're not Cain, but God did place him in space and time and in biblical history. And it is super important where God has placed this man. If we are to learn anything about his life or from his life, we need to ask that question. Look where God has placed this young man, Cain, the first boy who ever lived. His father never was a boy. Now that should strike you as, Cain's going to experience some things his father knew nothing about. By experience. Cain was going to be an infant, and his father was never an infant. Cain was going to be a toddler, and his father was never a toddler. Cain was going to be a teenager. I'm going to suggest his father was never a teenager. God made Adam, his father, a mature man. From the beginning, Adam never knew infanthood. That's a big deal. But here he is in space and time in the biblical history, this young man, Cain, and his position there raises the question about God putting him there. And it's a question that has tremendous issues for our faith, where God placed him in time and history and what we're not told about it, and for science, where God has placed him in space, time, and history, and what we're not told about it, and the relationship that should exist and does exist between faith and science. You think, Minister, I can't see any of that there. Well, are you going to? It is there. And if you look carefully, think deeply, you'll come across much more than is obvious. How rarely people ask questions like this. Why is he there? Look what we're not told. That's so important in the modern world, but doesn't even get a mention in this narrative in the ancient world. It is a great and important and vital question for faith and science, particularly the science of epistemology. You say, Minister, I've never heard of the word epistemology. Can you tell me what it is? Yes, it is. Epistemology is the science of the sources of knowledge. How we know what's true and what is valid knowledge is connected with the account of Cain's life. Science is there, history is there, existence is there. It's all there. Where is Cain in world history? Where is he? Let me put in another way. The question is of profound consequence. What date was it when he was born? What year was it? Are you thinking? What year was Cain born? What year were you born? Oh, I hope you can give me the year. Some of you don't like to share when you were born. What is it with women not wanting to tell us how old they are? I don't get it. But people can roll their eyes if they like. Here's a fact. You know when you were born, I hope. If not, seek medical attention ASAP. If you don't know the year you were born, something's not quite right. Everybody knows this whose mind is working. So what year was he born? You don't know, do you? You don't know. Very good. It's a question you should ask. Is it a question you've ever heard asked before? Probably not. That's the world we live in. The unthinking world is the world we live in. Former centuries thought more than we do in the modern world, even though we have more data and access than they did. Amazing. How old was his mum and dad when they had their first son? The Jewish writers in their commentaries have all sorts of speculation about Cain and Abel. Some of them suggest Cain had a twin sister and Abel had a twin sister. Others suggest that Cain and Abel were twins. Speculation, because their Hebrew isn't fabulous. Yes, Jews don't always have good Hebrew, just as English-speaking people don't always have good English. Just ask an American one or two English things and you'll see his English is American English, not so good as English. We won't go down that track, beloved, we won't. How old was his mum and dad when they had their first child? You don't know. Very good, you don't know. More profound and connected with these sorts of questions, how old was the world in which Cain and Abel and their mother and father lived? How old was the world? You don't know. And I'll tell you why you don't know, and why I therefore raise that technical, philosophical word, epistemology. We don't know because God hasn't told us. Now, this is the issue. God hasn't told us how old Adam and Eve were when they had their first son, second son. We're not told. God hasn't told us how old the world was. Controversial to some people, controversial. But it is a matter of fact, beloved. We're not told that, though many professing Christian people have tried to work it out. And I have to say, they mean well when they try to work that out. Have you heard of Archbishop Ussher? Archbishop Ussher did some mathematics, and he calculated that the world was made 4,000, I think it from memory, this is from memory, 4,000 years ago, more or less, and it was made about 3:15 in the afternoon, as we know it. Now, he's good, this guy, isn't he? Archbishop Ussher was red hot. If he could work that out, he was something else. How did he work it out? Well, he took the names of Old Testament characters and the ages that they lived and totted them all up. The assumption being that we're told all those who ever did live. And that there was never anyone with the same name at the same time. And if there's one thing that prevailed among the Hebrew history and its writers is this: people often got exactly the same name as their father. It was like me and my father, me and my grandfather. Wait for it, me and my great-grandfather. Wait for it, me and my great-great-grandfather. And it goes on until I broke the mold. Too many Jameses from Scotland. Too many. What James are you talking about? Like the police officer in America, in I think it was California, pulled a man over who wanted to argue about being a sovereign citizen. Have you heard of being a sovereign citizen? A load of nonsense. But you get, and Christian people buy into this sovereign citizenship argument that I'm not under the laws of the state because I'm just a person in a body traveling through time, and I'm not liable to the rules and regulations of the state of California or whatever it is. Well, this pastor, by the way, giving Christianity a bad name, is pulled over because he's made up this number plate, as we call it, and stuck it on the back of his vehicle, and it's a completely made up number plate, and he thinks this is going to mean I'm not paying any fines if I'm pulled over. So the cops pull him over and they ask for his ID, and he says, why do I have to give you my ID? I'm not subject to the laws of this state. And a big, long discussion happens, and it's painful to see the patience of these police officers. And this character is a professing Christian, a pastor in a church, giving Christianity a bad name. Not rendering to Caesar the things that belong to Caesar, but thinking, I'm going to live exempt from the taxes, exempt from the rules, exempt from all the requirements, and everybody else can have to live by them, and he'll reap the benefits of everybody else's conformity, and yet he wants to be above it all. It is arrogance. Submit to those that have the authority over you as those that are ordained by God. But this character isn't doing it, so he rolls his window down about 3 inches and has a long conversation with the police officer, and they demand his ID, which they are legally required to have in order to deal with the situation. What's your name? George. That's as far as they got. The police officer responds. He didn't use the English/Australian commonality, mate. He said, George, do you know how many Georges there are in the United States of America? That is not your ID. It's not adequate. Give us your driving license. He wasn't giving them a driving license. Don't have one. That was his first argument. The point I'm making here is, beloved, there were so many Georges you couldn't identify him. And Archbishop Usher tried to work out the age of the world based upon names in the Bible and how long they lived. The problem is this. Many people in the Bible had one name with the addition son of and then the name of the father, who actually had the same name. And so it goes on. But Usher pinned it down to around 4,000 years. At around 3:15 in the afternoon, God created everything that was created. How reliable do you think that is? Now, we are thinking here about epistemology connected with this man Cain's life. We're not told how old the world was in the book of Genesis. Not told at this point. God didn't say, well, in the reign of Ahasuerus, Cain arrived on the scene. We're not told that. Not like the prophecy of Isaiah, where God does anchor some revealed truth to historical persons that we can anchor in space-time history. And God has done that for a reason. But there are things that he has, places and times and characters, he hasn't done that with. And his not doing it also has a reason. The fact that God hasn't done it has a reason. We're not told how old he was at this time. We're not told how old his mother and father was when they had him as a son. We're not told how old the world was in which he lived at this point. We're not told. This is an epistemological issue. Cain's life teaches a lesson that God hasn't given us some knowledge, some facts. And it raises a huge controversial issue for professing Christians who want those facts, like Archbishop Usher. And some creation evolutionists Is there such a thing as a creation evolution? Is that a two-headed dog? What is that? I'm not sure what that is. But anyway, how old was the world this family lived in? Don't know. Why? Because here's the important takeaway. Exhaustive knowledge of events or persons in space-time history are not required in order to have valid knowledge of events in space-time history. Really big deal for you who want to believe the Bible. Why? Because you've got an army of people calling themselves scientists who say, we don't believe the book of Genesis. Why? Because it doesn't fit their epistemology. It doesn't fit. So rather than question their epistemology, they just quite simply reject the book of Genesis. And if they're professing Christians, and it blows my mind that there's a whole number of professing Christians who want to also believe in evolution. And by that, atheistic evolution. How you can be a professing Christian and hold atheistic evolution, to me, how the mind can do that. Well, I'm putting a big question mark on it. Let's put it like that, from my point of view. Listen, you're lying, you're deluded, or you're lying to yourself, or you're trying to live a contradiction, which is noetically not possible. Exhaustive knowledge of persons and events is not necessary in order to have valid knowledge of persons and events in history. We don't have exhaustive knowledge about Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, or a whole host of other persons or events in the biblical narratives. We don't have it. And I'm going to tell you why. Because we don't need it. Even about the life of Jesus, and that's thousands of years down the track. John tells us something about it at the end of his gospel. He says, if I was to tell you and write everything about the life of Jesus, what he said and did, all the books in the world wouldn't be enough to contain it. Now that's biblical hyperbole, which is a biblical linguistic mechanism, exaggerated statement to make a point. You've got to know these things. So John's telling us this, we haven't told you everything that Jesus taught, and we haven't told you everything he did, because you don't need to know that, though we do know it. We've told you what you need to know to believe that he is what he says he is, to know what he did was what had to be done, that you can be saved. We've told you what you need to know to be saved. We haven't told you, as a common TV show says, everything you know. So here is Cain, and we're not told things about him. We're not told how old the world was that he lived in. We're not told how old his parents were when they had him, and so many other things. It raises this amazing principle that Christians need to get. You need to master this belief. If you're going to be a useful Christian in God's kingdom, you need to keep this weapon in your holster. You have to keep this ready for action. St. Anselm of Canterbury had it long ago. Credo u intelligam was his Latin phrase. I believe in order to understand. What he means is, I believe the things I do know in order to understand the things I cannot know without having the things I do know. You need the foundational knowledge in order to arrive at the extensive knowledge, because without the foundational knowledge, you can't have a valid knowledge of what's there without it. And this is called epistemological foundationalism. Sorry. I want to make you better. Keep this in your holster. You don't need to know everything or have exhaustive knowledge in order to have valid belief. You don't need it. But that's what your enemies are saying you must give them. Your enemies and gospel enemies and Jesus haters and Bible rejectors demand that you know everything, or you can't believe anything. That's what they demand. That's their position. If you don't have exhaustive knowledge, then the knowledge you do have is invalid. That's their position. You don't know how God made the world, just that He made it. That's your claim. That's your truth claim, and you should claim that. And it is biblical. You don't need to know the how. But they're telling you, oh, we need to know the how. And that's why they have contrived their modern approach to atheistic evolution. They demand to know the how. They demand it. And they want to force that on you as Christians. They claim to be scientists. They're not. They claim to be philosophers. They're not. They're all scammers. They're all scammers. And they're on a mission to scam the Christian world of its legitimate, valid epistemology. And our epistemology stands upon this position. Having foundational knowledge, we don't need extensive knowledge. That's our position. I know that there was a man called Cain. I know his father's name and his mother's name. His father's name wasn't Cain. His father's name was Adam. His mother's name was Eve. I know he was the first son ever to be born in the world. I know how much of that came about, but I don't know everything about it. And there are people who are good Christian apologists, and they're on a mission to defend the Christian faith, and as polemicists, to attack the errors of the other side. Apologetics defends the faith. Polemics highlights the errors of the other side. It attacks. Like playing a football game. You've got your defense. You need your defense to stop the enemy scoring against you. But you also need your strikers. That's what they call strikers. To put a goal in the net on the other side. And in the Christian life, we have our defense, our apologetics, and we have our strikers. That is our attackers on the other side, or against the other side. I've got an expression I want you to write down. It's a truism as far as I know. As far as I know, it's a truism. But there's nothing new under the sun, so it may not be. The ESA Chain of Epistemology, truism. The ESA Chain of Epistemology. Let me explain it to you. The E is for everything, the S is for something, and the A is for anything. And it's all about this, beloved. If we must know everything before we know something, then we can never know anything. Are you getting it? If we must know everything before we know something, then we can never know anything. But that's what your enemies demand of you. Don't you ever sell me the book of Genesis as a credible version of creation or existence or origins if you don't know everything about what happened. That's their position. The scammers, all of them. They're scammers. You say, is this even biblical, this stuff? It is. Hebrews chapter 11 says this: faith, that is the truth we have and believe, is the evidence of things unseen, the things we don't have or can see without this. You see that? The truth we do have, that we know is valid, is the foundation upon which we base our knowledge of things we can't know without those things. See the point? Now, why is this as profound and great an issue as I'm suggesting it is? All from the life of Cain, all from his life. Because inability to explain things does not invalidate your knowledge of those things. You believe in the Trinity as a Christian, and if you don't believe in the Trinity, you're not saved. The Bible teaches that. Belief in the plurality of persons in the Godhead and their divine equality is a necessary evidence that you know God in a saving way. That's the teaching of the Bible. Of that, John is clear. If you don't accept that, you don't know God, he says. But this is a profound issue. How we know what we know, and is our knowledge about God, our knowledge about origins, our knowledge about life, our knowledge about how to deal with sin, it's all in this guy's life, Cain. And spared and well, we're going to see it. The ESA Chain of Epistemology, everything, something, anything. ESA, everything, something, anything. And it means, as I suggest to you, if we must know everything in order to know something, we can never know anything, because none of us knows everything. And if you need to know everything in order to know something, then you can never know anything. You got it? Isn't that simple? And yet, that's what they demand of you. They, I mean the enemies of Christianity, the forces of darkness, who want to make you feel as if you're not the scientist. They are. They are the scammer. It's a profound issue. There's a man in the Bible born blind in John chapter 9, and Jesus heals him. Jesus makes a clay and puts it on his eyes and says, go and wash in the pool of Siloam and you'll see. Jesus does this to him. And the man was born blind. His mother knows that. His father knows that. And off he toddles with this clay in his eyes. He goes to the pool. He obeys Jesus. Now look at the good outcomes from obeying Jesus. Born blind. Nobody can fix it. Nobody. But Jesus. Jesus makes the clay, puts it in his eyes. Do this and you'll see. Is it worth a try? Listen, do you think he tried a ton of... I think he must have tried a ton of hocus pocus in his life. Who wouldn't? Nothing to lose. You're blind, mate. All you've got here is to gain sight. So off he toddles. He does exactly what Jesus says, and it works. That's a good pattern to do life. Do what Jesus says. That's what his mother said. Do whatever he says. He washes and he sees. The religious haters who hate Jesus meet him. Because this happened, wait for it, on the Sabbath day. And they had very unbiblical rules and regulations about the Sabbath day. There were biblical ones, but they had unbiblical ones. And they put, who told you to do this? Jesus did. So they go to the mother and father and ask, is this your son? Yes. Do you know how he can see? Well, he's our son, all right, and he was born blind because we raised him blind from the day of his birth. But how he now sees, we don't know. They didn't know. Was their knowledge that he could see valid, even though they didn't know the how? Yeah, of course it was. You see the point? This is profound and super important for you as a Christian. Scientists and theologians all the time accept truths they cannot explain. I'm going to give you some. Consciousness. You've got it, haven't you? Are you aware of self right now? Are you thinking about the you? Yeah? Right. Now, what is it? You don't know. You don't know what consciousness is, but you're aware of it. Let's make everyone here a scientist. Let's put the best scientists in the world right here in this group. Let's ask them the same question. Do they know? No. But they accept it as true, and they use it every day of their lives in science and in ordinary life. They don't know everything about it, and yet they believe it's true. And you Christians don't know everything about your world or everything about your Bible, and yet you know it's true. Now you keep that in view. Here's another thing, energy. Let's ask the physicist, what is energy? I mean, get a dictionary and ask the dictionary, what is energy? And you'll get an explanation of its associated characteristics. But what is it? Don't know. What is light? What is it? Oh, well, we can measure its coming in waves, and we argue also theoretically it's coming also in streams. Yes. But what is it? Don't know. We know it is, but we don't know, or we don't have exhaustive knowledge about it. You see the point, beloved. But the scientist is demanding from the believer, the Christian person, knowledge about creation that we don't need to give him. And it's a wise thing for Christian people who want to face challenges about how old the world is and say, listen, I don't need to know how old it is. Like Cain didn't need to know how old it is, but he knew that it was. And his knowledge of the existence of his world was not invalidated by his ignorance of how old it was. Whether it was 1 trillion years old, which I don't believe, or 3 weeks old. Look, listen, there are some people who think this is a very young couple, Adam and Eve. What about the psychosomatic union between your body and your soul? You don't know the how of it, but you know it's true that you are joined to your body, don't you? Yes, you do. You know that. So when you drink too much drink, that affects the soul inside. How does that join? No surgeon knows. No psychiatrist knows. Only God knows. And I'm going to suggest, beloved, only God can ever know. And I'm going to suggest, even in heaven, you will not be able to know many things that God knows. We don't have infinite noetic capability. We don't. What about space? Now, are you Star Trek or Star Wars? Are you a Trekkie or a Star Wars guy? Now, I'm going to show my hand. I'm a Star Trek guy. You know that Spock thing, live long and prosper, which Spock said, Leonard Nimoy said came from the Hebrew letter Shin that he learned in the synagogue from a rabbi. It's the fingered letter of the Hebrew alphabet. He said, live long and prosper. That's what he did. That was his symbol in the show Star Trek. And they were going into space to boldly go, wait for this unpopular phrase, beloved, that your enemy, because of this very issue, has stolen from you. To boldly go where no man has gone before. You know what they're saying now? To boldly go where no one has gone before. That's the anti-man brigade. That's what that is. But old Shatner and Nimoy, they went into space. Now, here's the question for the astrophysicist. What is space? You're going to wait forever. they don't know. So you don't know, Mr. Scientist, anything about this thing, but you believe that it's true. Yeah. And you want to invalidate my knowledge of things, which is greater than your knowledge of space, because I don't know everything about it. He does. He does. Now, what's the takeaway? Cain's life raises this issue, God not telling us things. We don't need to know them. Christianity is based upon revealed truths. That doesn't mean God has revealed exhaustively everything that can be known. And why has God not done it? Because you don't need to know it. Remember what Jesus said? A profound thing he said. A wonderful, pivotal point of profundity. A pivotal point of profundity. That's three plosives, to use the grammar language. He said, if it was not so, I would have told you. In other words, I've told you what you need to know. And what did he tell them? In my Father's house are many mansions. And the mansions there is not about marble and gold and all sorts of luxurious things you see. It's about a permanent dwelling place contrasted with a temporary dwelling place here. In my Father's house, there is permanent dwelling for many. I'm going to prepare it. I'm going to die a death that has to be died in order to prepare it. I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to die so that you can have this wonderful reality. I've told you the truth. I've told you the truth. So live by it. Those who want to tell you otherwise are scammers and bigots. They're anti-God, anti-Jesus. They demand a standard from you. Exhaustive knowledge of things that they don't demand of themselves, like the astrophysicist. He believes in space, he knows it's true, and he doesn't know anything about it. The astrophysicist. The queen of sciences, theology. The king of sciences, philosophy. Rightly so called. Cain wasn't born into a world an orphan. He had a family. If there are massive lessons about epistemology and why God doesn't tell us some things, and that we shouldn't get hung up on things that God hasn't told us, don't go and choose a hill to die on that's not worthy of your death. There are Christians out there squabbling themselves forever about how old the world is. The question should be asked. But if God hasn't told us the answer, don't spend your life trying to find it out. You might never know. Because you don't need to. You don't need to. You don't need to. And that you don't know these things doesn't make your Christianity null and void, does it? Now, as I mentioned, beloved, Cain wasn't born an orphan. Born an orphan? Or wasn't an orphan? He was born into a family. And boy, the lessons in that family. We'll touch on them spared and well this evening. Amen.